And we are joined right now by the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, Sara Nelson. Sara, thank you so much for being here this morning.
I couldn't be happier to be with you and Zerlina. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
No, we're always thrilled to talk to you. Usually it's about something that's a little more optimistic than this one if we're talking about the labor market overall. But we got to unpack what have people lost their minds? What is happening on planes right now? 1,300 incidents of unruly passengers, whereas normally it's 100 in a year. What is going on? How are flight attendants feeling safe?
It's a problem. It's a huge problem, and it is a new wave that has been inspired by all this conflict in our politics and international discourse, and it starts mostly with the discussion over whether or not you have to wear masks, because many people have been led to believe that it's political rhetoric rather than a public health necessity. So we're finding ourselves having to ensure that people are wearing masks, because guess what? When you come on an airplane, the rules are different. You don't get to bring your gun, your knife. You have to sit with a seatbelt on. And also right now you have to wear a mask, because in an enclosed space, you're putting everyone else at risk if you're not wearing a mask, as this virus is not yet under control.
I mean, I feel like airplanes, they don't bring out the best, I would say, in people. Generally, people are not
That's
their
true.
best
And generous
at the airport. I've found in my experience traveling. But I feel like, that doesn't mean it's okay for flight attendants to be the target of abusive behavior, because, people are, having an existential meltdown over the fact that they have to put a piece of fabric over their mouth. But what are is there, I know that flight attendants have a union, right? That's what you are.
Yeah.
But what mechanisms are in place to really protect them? Because it feels to me like they're so vulnerable, up in the air, dealing with people who, we've seen violence. We've seen people, turn to violence in these situations. And I'm very concerned about their physical safety and their mental health as well.
Well, I really appreciate that. And physical safety and mental health, it's an issue that the whole country is dealing with this year. This has been a pretty rough year for a lot of reasons. And when we go to work now, let me just say, our union worked really, really hard to make sure that there were federal regulations, laws in place that said if you act out on a plane, if you interfere with crew members' duties, then you're going to face up to $35,000 in fines and potential jail time. And so we had that in place well before this past year. That's something that we've built up over the years to make sure that people understand that they have to take our instructions seriously, because we're looking out for everyone's safety, right? Everybody has to come to the door of the airplane with the spirit of we're all in this together, or else it doesn't work. And oftentimes we do have to de-escalate conflict, because you've got people stuffed into a small space, and human nature, it's sometimes the conflict can be created. But when that happens, we have to de-escalate right away, because people are so close that can quickly escalate. In fact, some of the situations we've seen, it's not even the people who are refusing to wear the mask, it's the people who are responding to the people who are refusing to wear the mask, and they get so angry that tempers flare and violence breaks out. So we know how important it is to tamp that down. On January 13th, the FAA administrator finally backed us up and came out in a very strong way and said the FAA is not only going to enforce these regulations that are in place, but they're going to take a zero-tolerance stance. So none of this, we're going to counsel you, and if you seem to be reformed, we're going to let you off the hook. No, if you act out, if you interfere with a crew member's duties, you are going to face hefty fines and potential jail time. And then that has also been backed up by the Biden administration's transportation mask policy, and the backup of TSA enforcing that with fines if people are not wearing that in the airport. So we're trying to have a lot more clear instruction from leadership to let people know what's expected of them and what the consequences are going to be if they act out. But to your point about how people act differently on a plane, flight attendants have seen that over the entire course of our career. People come to the plane and sometimes they order, a tomato juice and ginger ale when they don't order that anywhere else in their lives. Or it's the one time that they think that, they don't drink the rest of the year, but when they get on a plane, they've got it in their head, they've got to have a drink, which also adds to these problems as well. So normally it can create a little bit of an unbalanced circumstance, but most of the people come to the door of the airplane with kindness in their hearts and a desire to have a safe, uneventful flight, and we are trained to call on the other passengers to help us. And in this situation, part of the problem has been that the rhetoric out there and the way that people have been really keyed up before they get on our plane. And then we've got a lot of first-time flyers. It's only leisure travel happening right now, so you don't have regular business travelers who kind of know the program. All of these things, and then the people who've been pent up and are ready to just get out after a year of COVID. All of these things are, coming together on our planes, and flight attendants are in a situation that is the most tense and potentially the most violent we've ever seen.
That's such a good point about really the business travelers. Yeah.
We hadn't even thought about the business travelers. We talk a lot about, who is flying? And, occasionally you've got somebody that, has to fly because, they're a reporter and they're going to communities that have been hardest hit and they got to get there to do the reporting. And sometimes you've got, friends with, ill relatives across the country who have to get there to see them and they're vaccinated. And then we're like, but who is everyone else? And everyone else is taking vacations?
It's mostly leisure travels because most of the businesses still have travel restrictions. So you're right. There are exceptions to that. People who have to go and have had to go this whole year. And even, healthcare professionals who need to go to hot spots and help tamp down the virus. So there has been critical need there and critical infrastructure, but the vast majority of people on planes are leisure travelers, and that's because businesses have still not lifted their travel restrictions, and that also has to do with international travel. So as long as we have the virus raging in other countries and travel restrictions, businesses are not really seeing a reason to lift those travel restrictions either because they need access to the entire network, and that's just not available yet.
Right. Are flight attendants trained to break up physical fights? The videos that I'm watching, the Today Show did the large expose after this piece was written where they showed, 3 minutes of really horrific clips from inside airplanes. And it was mostly really violent physical altercations. I think of flight attendant training as calming down freaked out passengers or dealing with that one drunk guy or, I don't think of it as breaking up a fight in a small space.
Yeah.
Is that part of flight attendant training?
It has been for a very long time. There is the errant, aggressive passenger that we might need some help from other passengers to help to do. What we have seen, though, in this situation is that this isn't just like after 9/11 and we're looking for security threats and we're calling on other passengers to help us pin somebody down. These are aggressions. You're right. This is turning into brawls. And this is what we know can happen if you don't calm people down. And because tensions are already so high and people are already so on edge, and people have been led to believe that they are completely at odds with each other. I mean, a hat or a piece of clothing that someone's wearing can set people off and feel like there's conflict on the plane. And so this is what we're dealing with when we go to work. And when we don't have an atmosphere where we can kind of look around and see the people who are very used to traveling, very used to wanting to have an uneventful flight, understand really what our role is, it makes it much harder because we're doing both what you just described, calming down the first-time travelers and trying to help families get settled and people who don't really know what they're doing, or they haven't flown in a long time. They're asking what the rules are, so we've got more of that going on. And then you also have this situation of these increased tempers and conflict starting even before people get to the door of the airplane.
Man, that's a tough job under normal circumstances. I say that as a passenger who has been comforted by many flight attendants when I was having a hard time with the plane situation. That's not an easy job under good circumstances, and these are certainly not not good circumstances. I had a question about, like, vaccine passports, right? Like, that's become a major hot button. No one's talking about it yet, but the right is very worried that we're all going to have vaccine passports. And in my mind, that's no different than, like, you can't fly to some countries unless you can prove you've been vaccinated for yellow fever. Like, I've done that before. I didn't feel like my rights were being infringed on. I felt like I was contributing to public health. But would that make things better for flight attendants? If you had to prove that you were vaccinated to get on a plane, at least then you would know that everybody on the plane was unlikely to spread disease. Like, is that something that you guys are hoping happens?
Well, I'll tell you what. So our position on this, and first of all, we're not going to be able to control what other countries require. So let's just be clear about that. Yeah, and you referenced it too. This is not something new, right? But also, vaccine passports, there are potential problems there with equity issues with people who have been able to have access to the vaccine. And are we going to be telling people that they can't travel and have access to medical assistance, for example, if they haven't been able to get vaccinated? There's a lot of issues there. But there's also issues. We want to make sure that anything that's in place is voluntary and temporary and specific to COVID-19, because we're also a worldwide network. And there are some countries who would like to keep track of when women are menstruating and then say that they can't travel then. So we're very aware of these issues of equality and equity and the international networks that we travel in. So we're concerned about giving any space for that kind of oversight to come into our space. However, vaccine passports can also help alleviate some of the congestion in the airport, because if you have a passport and you're able to prove that, you may get through more quickly some of the screening that happens on the outside of the airport before security, some of the mask checks that people will go through, temperature checks, and anything that they have in these airports that are slowing things down. So it can help make the travel experience easier. And of course, if we know that, that's great. The problem is that we're not really set up in a way to make this mandatory and still, provide public travel to people who need it.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a major issue, mainly because, just even anecdotally, as a human, I don't know if I will feel comfortable getting on an airplane unless I know everybody else has been vaccinated. Not only because, they could be transmitting COVID, but you don't want someone else to be sick either, right? I think that's a piece of it too.
I appreciate that so much. And actually what we are doing right now today is we have a massive day of action with about 400 other groups, a lot of people in the labor movement calling on the Biden administration to take the lead at the WTO to have a waiver of intellectual property so that Big Pharma can't keep control over the production of the vaccine, and we can get it out to poor and developing countries. We are not going to get this pandemic under control. We're not going to get this out if we don't ramp up production and mobilize the world to do it. And right now, that's we're not doing it at the kind of capacity that we could and we need to in order to get the entire world vaccinated before these variants take off and the pandemic just mutates and continues to go on and disrupt our lives. So I hear you. I think that, for the past year, what the airline industry has tried to do in the absence of leadership from the Trump administration was to put in place a layer of safety and health that helps to cut down on the potential spread on planes. So the mask policies, if people are wearing those, studies show that there's virtually almost no chance of transmission. That combined with the sanitation that's going on between flights, the HEPA filtration, so the filtration of the air on the planes, which is safer than in most office buildings. And then also the modified service. One of the things that we're really fighting with the airlines on right now is don't start to bring a bunch of that service back and have carts in the aisles so that people are taking their masks off to eat and drink while flight attendants are standing there, and then we're moving on to the next row. So there's a lot of things that you can do with layered safety and health that can cut down on the risk. But then the most important thing right now is that we're doing everything we possibly can to get everyone vaccinated so that this thing doesn't take off again.
Right. So true.
It feels like you're caught in such a catch-22 because you want fewer people on the plane so that everyone is safe, but then you also have to be concerned about massive layoffs this summer if airlines don't get more business. So do you find yourself, because we have not had the leadership throughout this pandemic that we needed, we do now for the vaccine delivery system, but we certainly didn't when precautions were the thing that we were talking about.
Right.
Do you feel like you're stuck between both wanting a customer base and also wanting your customer base to stay home and keep everybody as safe as possible?
Well, luckily, our union has done a great job of getting federal relief that isn't just for the executives. It's not for them at all, and it caps their pay and bans stock buybacks and dividends, and is just for the workers. So all the federal dollars that come to the airlines can only be spent on frontline worker pay and benefits, keeps us in our jobs. We have those protections through the end of September. We've had a lot of people taking early retirements and everything, so we actually believe that the demand for air travel, coupled with those protections through the end of September, will get us to a place where we won't be facing layoffs. And that's been really important to be able to keep that infrastructure in place. It's a program that we designed with the House Democrats, and luckily we had Chuck Schumer fighting for it in the last seconds of the CARES Act, and it's the most transparent and workers first package. And then we continued that in the emergency relief in December. We had a huge fight to get that done, but then the Biden administration continued it in the American Rescue Plan. So we're in good shape because we have retained our jobs, retained our paychecks. We've continued to have our health insurance and pay our local taxes so that we're also not a burden on our communities. It's a really good program. And that should also give us now the space to be able to do to take the right public health measures during this time to get the pandemic under control. So we feel like we're racing very hard through September to really focus on those public health measures. And that's why today our top priority is calling on the Biden administration to follow through on a campaign promise that Joe Biden made to take the lead at the WTO to get this waiver in place so we can get the vaccine distributed all around the world.
I'm just glad that people doing the job as hard as flight attendants have it. I'm glad that they have leadership like yours. Sara Nelson is the president of that union, representing 50,000 people at 20 airlines. Thank you so much for breaking down this important story for us this morning.
Thank you so much. And yeah, as we say, get vaxxed, wear a mask, and come fly with us.
Oh, I like that.
That sounds great.
All right.
We're going to take a quick break.
Stay safe.
Stay safe. We don't have to tell you to wear your mask. You just told us to wear your mask. So just stay safe. Do whatever you've been doing.